Satnam, Satnam, Sanam, and welcome, welcome, welcome. So let me ask you a couple of questions before we get started here today. Are you tired of feeling trapped in never-ending, repeating cycles of ancestral, yes, because it's ancestral, emotional pain? I'm talking about repeating patterns in your lineage where you've noticed that not only you, perhaps your mom, grandma, aunts, someone around you has also been repeating patterns of anxiety, of depression, of addiction, of divorce, toxic relationships, maybe even prosperity plateaus where you can't just get above and beyond a certain amount of money. Well, if you're ready to reclaim your sovereignty and to actually break free and to create a life of true permanent healing and transformation, then I welcome you to join me today in today's Sovereign Woman podcast, where we're going to be talking about specifically and diving deep into the 3 game-changing keys that will help you disrupt these cycles once and for all. Get ready to heal your nervous system, to rewire your brain, and to unlock the medicine cabinet within you to rewire and go beyond these patterns of ancestral pain. Sadnam, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is such an honor to be back with all of you. What is happening, my beautiful Raquelita? I love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us here live on Instagram, on Facebook, or if you're catching the replay, welcome, welcome, welcome. I have been so buried deep in a lot of the things that I'm working on, and especially a project that is very near and dear to my heart that has been a long time coming, that has given me a lot of clarity, passion, and energy to continue to do the work that I do with women every single day, which is in helping them disrupt ancestral karmic patterns of pain. What's happening, my beautiful friend? How are you? It's so good to connect with you here on Instagram. The Diva Dad, that's such a great name. When I think of you, that's all I can think about. Diva Dad for sure, my friend. How are you, Frankie? So thank you for joining me here. If you haven't connected in a while, like I said, it's such an honor to be back. I just got back also from Mexico, from a beautiful state known as Oaxaca. I don't know if any of you have heard of Oaxaca. This was my first time there. So I'm rocking this really nice tan right now, but more importantly, I'm really integrating a lot of like the beauty and the splendor and all of the amazing experiences that I was able to experience while I was there last week, because it is a very magical state in Mexico. So clean, so beautiful. The people were so tremendously nice that I always ask myself, or I always comment to my husband, and I tell him that I wish we would have explored Mexico, a lot more parts of Mexico a lot sooner, because we always went to all over the world, like Thailand and Greece and Europe. And I think for many of us, especially as it relates to programs and patterns, like we're so made afraid of where we come from, our roots, especially as it relates to Mexico, like all these different things that are portrayed as how unsafe it is and how go other places because other places are more beautiful. When I can't even explain to you in words, like there have been places that I've been to in Mexico that I thought for sure I was like in Europe, or I thought I was in another part of the country or the world. Mexico has so many beautiful, amazing locations that I've only just started to tap into all of these beautiful locations. In fact, one of the things that I have made as a mission of mine is to actually visit all of the pueblos mágicos of Mexico. There's 132 of them, I think there are, and I've only been to 6 of them. So I still have quite a few to go to, but really enriching myself in my culture and my roots, and realizing that there is so much beauty and there's so much potential in learning more about myself, because that's one of the things about the healing journey. And a very wise teacher that I love and who continues to guide me on my path is a monk, an exiled monk from Nepal. His name is, or used to be, his name was Shogam Trungpa. He's no longer in the physical form, but there's a whole section of the books of the book that he wrote about being a spiritual warrior that speaks a lot about, in order for us to heal and bring the healing fully home, we have to honor our roots. We have to honor where we came from. which is why a big part of the work that we do in disrupting ancestral karmic patterns is the spiritual psychotherapy aspect of learning beyond forgiveness, learning how to accept so that we're not holding grievances, resentment, or basically running away from a past that perhaps was not so pleasant and that perhaps was filled with a lot of abuse or abandonment or trauma. And that when we actually start to do this work of facing these very difficult aspects of our past and our ancestors, that's when we actually not only liberate ourselves, but we liberate our ancestors, and we liberate 7 generations before and after us, because that's the beauty of this healing work. So being able to visit Mexico and connect with my roots is a very big part of the ancestral healing work that I do with other women, and also what I do for myself personally, because it's an always ongoing journey of growth and evolution. And so today I want to focus on bringing to your awareness these very 3 important elements that you absolutely need in order to disrupt these ancestral karmic patterns, because you've all heard me talk a lot about the science of epigenetics and how it is proven through this science that has been around since the 70s and the 80s. It just has not even tapped into any type of mainstream media type, because it would change everything that we know about genetics, about illnesses, and about what does get passed down through the DNA, which is not physical illnesses. Many of us think that physical illnesses like cancer and things of that nature get passed down through us in the DNA, when the science of epigenetics proves that that's not the case. There are very, very few actual genetic diseases, like less than 1 to 2%, that would actually get passed down to you in the DNA. But what epigenetics does prove is that the way your ancestors dealt with their pain, the way that they dealt with their emotions, because ultimately the language of our ancestors is emotions, that became an imprint. It became a frequency of sound in the DNA that does get passed down generation to generation. So how they dealt with their trauma, how they dealt with abuse, and if they never received therapy or healing for it, then sadly, those become imprints in the DNA that then become patterns in your life. So this is why I say to you, if you are going through mental health instabilities like depression, or you're going through anxiety or addiction, or perhaps you're repeating the same cycles in relationships. Maybe there's a lot of divorce in your life, in your mama's life, in your grandma's life, or constantly aligning with these really unconscious abusive relationships, then those are all frequencies and patterns that did get passed down to you. And when you yourself are not managing stress, because stress is not bad, all of us go through stress every single day. Even myself as a yogi, as a holistic healer, teacher, spiritual teacher, stress just means that the world is demanding more of you. It's what you do and how you respond to that stress that will dictate whether these genes of trauma, of addiction will turn on in you or not. Because if you have preventive practices like the ones we're going to talk about today, you're basically managing your stress in a healthy way so that those genes don't turn on of addiction, or that gene of consistently aligning with that unconscious relationship, right? Attracting and aligning that in your life to it. So the stress is not the problem. Our genes are not the problem. It's how we are managing. And that's the biggest root issue, because if we're not managing the stress of life, whether it's because of our business growing, we're in a new relationship, or perhaps because we haven't done any of the healing work and we're still dealing with the PTSD from trauma, then we're going to end up really hitting rock bottom as it relates to the increase of these patterns that, again, didn't start with you, but could end possibly with you if you follow these 3 key elements, which we're going to talk about today. So as it relates to these things that we actually need, we need these things, these elements, because these programs are so hardwired in our DNA, right? And these 3 key elements is what I've seen as the same simple techniques, things that need to be applied and integrated, not only in the lives of my clients, but also in my life, and which is how I came up with this program in general, and how I started to help women disrupt these ancestral karmic patterns. Now, the first thing that we have to talk about sounds easier said than done, but yet it is the foundational piece of getting to the root cause and really disrupting these patterns at the level of the DNA. And what I'm referring to is commitment. Commitment. Now, when you hear the word commitment, you might either be scared of it. Many of us have commitment issues, or perhaps you think, why would I need commitment in order for me to heal or disrupt these ancestral karmic patterns? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is that when you do this type of healing work, holistic healing work, which means we're dealing with your emotions, it means that we have to rewire and heal your nervous system and your brain. Okay. There are no magic pills. There are no shortcuts. There is no pharmaceutical, no medicine that can get you there faster. You cannot rush your healing. And so, in fact, at the very beginning of the healing journey is what I always tell my clients as they're joining my group coaching program, my communities, my healing community. The world is going to feel like it's getting worse before it gets better. This is not all about love and light. You have to understand, with the work that I teach, spiritual psychotherapy, combined with the meditations that you practice, it's like you're going into a hotel room with a lot of rooms, and many of those rooms you haven't been into for years and years and years. So think about it. You open the door, which is the subconscious mind, to these rooms. There are memories there. There's awareness that you have to literally remove the dust from. That's going to cause you to cough. That's going to cause you to not see clearly. It's going to make you feel uncomfortable, because what happens with this type of work is that without the commitment, you're going to give up immediately. And there's many reasons for that. Either your ego, which is your identities to the trauma, your identity to the health problem, whatever that addiction you have to that identification, is going to fight you hard. If you've carried that program in you of I'm not worthy, I'm poor, I'm ugly, I'm always anxious, there's something wrong with me, for all your lifetime and maybe even lifetimes before, it's going to require what is known as japji, which is repetition of introducing new sound, mantra chanting, new breathing techniques to disrupt these actual patterns. So quite honestly, at the beginning, as you're doing this work, the ego will tell you to stop doing it. And it's for many reasons, right? Like in my situation and my client's situation, especially growing up Catholic, you never really being around practices like meditation or Kundalini yoga or spiritual psychotherapy, like your mind will trick you into either making you feel guilty, like this is not for me. What is this? This is not based on my religion. What is my mom going to think? Or this doesn't work for me. I'm not doing it right. There's so many ways that the ego will connivingly convince you that the work is either not working or that it's not for you. And the first 2 weeks are bloody hell, because you're in constant battle with your own mind, especially if you've never done any type of healing work, inner healing work. Why? Because it's called shadow work for a reason. You have to face these shadows. You have to become aware of these thoughts that you're constantly having that are creating your outer reality that have been passed down to you. And that takes a level of commitment that is very, very high. In fact, it requires you to be ambitious. You have to be ambitious to choose yourself to be the cycle breaker in your lineage. Ancestors don't choose you. The ancestors choose everyone, but you have to choose yourself. You have to commit, because discipline ultimately is the highest form of yoga. It is literally as important as God herself in your life. So you have to commit not only once, you have to commit sometimes 2, 3 times, just the way some of my clients had to. The first 2 weeks, I don't want to do this. I can't. I don't have time. It's not working. What is my mom going to think? What is my aunt going to think? To continuously committing to saying yes, to saying yes, to saying yes, till you get to this point where you're doing it because you're actually experiencing the differences that it's doing in your outer reality, which happens at very different times for different people. I can tell you that women that practice this work, the sooner they surrender and accept what they're doing, the faster that this happens, right? But the more that they resist, the more that their ego takes control of their identity, the more that they push to hold on to the trauma, the more that they're going to suffer and the more uncomfortable they're going to feel. So it takes commitment for you to have the seed of faith that even if you're not seeing physical changes, especially for the first couple of weeks, because it's just like supplements or, the herbs that we take, like, for example, turmeric. Turmeric is a powerful agent. It literally has been said, some doctors say it is even more powerful as a medicine than chemotherapy or any pharmaceutical that's out there. Well, when you take the turmeric, the first day you don't feel it necessarily, right? The second day you might not feel it either. In fact, for me, like supplements and things like that, it took me about 4 to 6 weeks for my body to really start to integrate and to feel that medicine. So what would have happened if I would have given up in those first 4 to 6 weeks? Then my body wouldn't have had integrated actually the medicine. It's the same thing with this type of healing work. When you're going within, if you don't constantly recommit, and this is why we have like a 40-day commitment that you have to make to practice the same meditation, then you're going to give up very quickly and you're going to say it's not working for me, or it doesn't work, or something's wrong with me. So commitment is a very important element that you absolutely need. And this is also why a lot of women don't hire a coach or a mentor, because they know that once they hire a coach or a mentor, they're going to have to commit. And that makes them afraid. Why? Because ultimately the ego wants to hold on to these actual identities as much as possible. And I see it happen all the time, whether that happened with me when I was afraid of what people would think of me when I was doing this work, or my mom, which now she asks me for meditations, and my aunts and uncles are like talking about how great of a transformation I've been through, and they're so proud of me and all these things. Same things with my clients. They went through the same issues of, what are people going to think of me? It's not working. Why is my life getting worse? Right. And now fast forward to 8 weeks after being in the academy, or even a few more months of being in the academy, what they're experiencing is healing in their relationships. I mean, I just had someone last week. We all know that we celebrated Mother's Day, right? And she shared in the comments in our coaching call how before this academy, before this program, before this work that I introduced her to, she never would have thought that she could ever forgive her mother. She first thought she didn't have to. And second is, even if she thought she wanted to deep down, like, she never thought it would be possible. And fast forward, and she's only been in the academy for a few months, fast forward to a few months, and she has fully healed and forgiven her mother for all the things that have occurred to her in her life. Talk about release of ancestral karmic pattern of the mother wound. When we have a mother wound, a lot of us are unconscious. We think, oh, our mom is so nice. She did the best she could. I'm just going to love her. But deep down, we hold a lot of resentment for how she didn't stand up for us, for how she abused us, not because she wanted to, right? Because she was unconscious herself, how she was depressed and not present as a mom, right? Again, not done consciously, unconsciously. We don't realize we hold a lot of resentment. And if we don't commit to healing that relationship over and over again, we won't be able to reap the results that my client is reaping right now, of having a healed relationship with our mother, which then healed their relationship with their significant other. Because when we have a broken relationship with our mom, our romantic relationships suffer, our personal relationships suffer, and the relationship you have with yourself suffers. So it's a constant recommitment with the work, but more importantly, as you start the journey, when you actually hire someone, when you join a therapy or a group, it's that commitment that I'm going to commit to doing what I'm being told to do in order to get the results that I want to get, which leads us to the second element of disrupting ancestral karmic patterns that is very much needed, and that is having the right support system. Excuse me, the second one actually is having a solid plan and using the right method. Support system is 3, which we're going to talk about right now. The right method. What do I mean by the right method? There is a reason why there is such low success rates, super low success rates when it comes to healing from emotional pain as it relates to traditional therapy or pharmaceuticals. In fact, what we are seeing right now is the damage that antidepressants, pharmaceuticals, pills have done to society and to women, to numb them, to get to the point where I have read stories and I have personally met people that are now suffering through the abuse of these antidepressants, where they are numb to life. They're dead inside. They want to commit suicide. They are hurting other people. They're completely disassociated and not connected to themselves, and especially not to their children. They're having panic attacks. This is all the results of a society that was given antidepressants and pharmaceuticals like it was candy. That is not healing. Pharmaceuticals, antidepressants are a very bad band-aid that will ultimately, the venom will be exposed. So there's no shortcuts. And we're seeing the repercussions of a society that has been overfed, not just the parents, because the parents are not present because they're unconscious, because they're on pharmaceuticals. But then if you're a parent that gets on pharmaceuticals, you're more than likely also to get your kids off your back to put them on pharmaceuticals. And then we wonder why there's mass shootings from these kids that have these, they don't even have emotions. They're completely dead inside. This is a big problem, and it's not your street drugs. I'm talking about pharmaceuticals that were given to you from your doctor that you trusted. It's a very, very horrible cycle that many women are on, and they're very ashamed of it too, because these pharmaceuticals are very addicting. So having the right method is not traditional therapy where you just talk about things, because by talking about things, you're not addressing the problem of your nervous system, which has been wired from your mom and her mom in the womb. And we're not addressing the problem of your brain, which has been fractured and damaged through abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, emotional abuse, neglect, abandonment, depression, anxiety, all these different things. Even if you've been through trauma yourself, that brain, even if you're 45, is not functioning at the level of a 45-year-old. You're talking about maybe a brain of a 90-year-old. Yet, when you meditate, we also have the science of the brain of a meditator. If she's 50 or 60, her brain looks like a 12-year-old brain. Why? Because it is the right method. The right method means that you're addressing the nervous system and you're addressing the brain in order to heal the emotional pain. The right method does not mean slapping a pharmaceutical on and pretending like the pain is not there. That is not the right method. And this is why women feel so let down, why they feel like there's no hope, and why they ultimately don't give themselves permission to heal. Without the right method that addresses the DNA, that addresses your ancestral patterns, because again, I can assure you, if you're going through depression, you're going through anxiety, your mom has been going through it, or your aunt or your grandma. This is a pattern. It's not new. So at least you don't have to take the credit for it, right? We have to learn to get to the root cause of these things with the right methods, right? We have to address the brain and the nervous system. And more importantly, what I mentioned earlier, we cannot skip over the forgiveness work. We cannot skip over the acceptance work. We spend a lot of time, because we don't have a stable nervous system and an agile brain, in trying to forgive, when what we have to learn to do is learn to accept. And the way we do that, and this is the spiritual psychotherapy, this is why it's so important to have the right method. Spiritual psychotherapy goes deeper than your traditional psychotherapy. Why? Because in spiritual psychotherapy, what we're doing is that we are acknowledging that the abuse happened, that the abandonment happened, that the neglect happened. We're not denying it. We're not all love and light. But what shifts in our perception is the reason it happened. You see, when you were, especially if abuse happened to you between the ages of 0 to 7, or your mom was getting home depressed a lot, She was worried about money. There was abuse where your father beat your mom, or you saw a lot of neglect in the family. The sad part about that is that you as a child, when your mom comes home upset because of work or her husband or your dad or whatever, you think that it's because of you, that there's something wrong with you. So your brain develops in this way where you believe that there is something intrinsically wrong with you, and that if your own parents couldn't love you unconditionally, there's no way that anyone else in this world can love you. If your parents didn't give you the dignity and the respect as a child because they didn't have it for themselves, you grow up to be an adult that does not respect herself. You grow up to be an adult that doesn't give herself dignity, right? So because of that, the brain continues to deteriorate, right? The nervous system continues to stay wired in those patterns of what your mom also went through. So what we need is to do the work of acceptance so that we can realize that, yes, these things did happen to me as a child, or to my grandma, or to my great grandma. I'm not denying it, but they didn't happen because of my lack of worthiness. They didn't happen because there's something wrong with me. They happened because of the level of consciousness of that individual. That is how Jesus Christ was able to be on the cross and say, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Why? Because he had a stable nervous system, an agile brain, where he knew the attack that was happening to him was not being done to him because he's a bad person or because God was punishing him. That's victim mentality. He knew that these people that were putting him on that cross were doing it because of their level of pain. And you might say, well, how is that going to help me? It liberates you completely. It liberates you from the vengefulness, the resentment. And if you're not in resentment and you're not in anger, then you can use that energy to create instead of to destroy. Because when we skip over the forgiveness work and we don't have the right method, we are using up our energy all day, which is our emotions, unconsciously, and staying angry and being revengeful and being hateful, which is not helping anyone, especially not you. So we have to have the right method that addresses the nervous system, the brain, and also does not skip over the spiritual psychotherapy work of acceptance and of forgiveness, which only gets easier once your nervous system becomes healthier. Your nervous system is not healthy if you don't meditate, if you don't do breathing techniques through meditation, if you don't chant. Why? Because you're consuming information all day. Plus, you're wired from your nervous system, your mom's nervous system and your grandma's nervous system. So if she went through a lot of abuse, you have those same patterns in your nervous system. And that's why you always feel anxious. That's why you always feel nervous. That's why you always feel depressed. So it's very, very important for us to release ourselves from that by finding the right method, which takes us to the third element of hitting these patterns at the root cause, which is you need a solid support system. That's the third element. Number one, commitment. Number two, you need the right method, not a band-aid, like a pharmaceutical. And number three is you need the right support system. Now, this is huge. Again, women do not invest in themselves. I've always invested in myself. I always have a coach, whether it's a business coach, a spiritual coach, somebody who's done what I want to do already. Why? Because that collapses time, that helps me eliminate any things that I shouldn't do. It helps me get right to the results that I want to get. This is why most women will not join a group coaching program or will not join therapy or anything like that. It is because they know that once they pay for it or once they commit to it, it's going to require them to leave their victimization mentality and to actually take accountability. And that's scary. Having a coach hold you accountable really threatens your ego and the way you've identified with your traumas in so many ways. So most of the time, especially like for me as a coach, as a mentor, as a spiritual teacher, as a holistic practitioner, my clients, I'm like their worst enemy because I trigger them in every way possible. And it's not done to make them feel sad or uncomfortable. It's so that they could grow. With the right support system, with the right mentor, with the right community, the healing journey not only doesn't feel lonely, but you can actually see the possibilities. That's one of the things that's so beautiful in our community. You know, we have women from all spectrums of life that have joined us, whether they've been through emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whether they themselves were the ones that perhaps did things in their life, in their past, like in their marriage or growing up, a lot of guilt, regret, you know, all different avenues and aspects of life. And when new women join in, and the women who have already gone through the program or have been in the program for some time, when they speak up and start to talk about that time when they couldn't forgive their mom, when they couldn't forgive their abuser, when they couldn't sit in their bodies for longer than a minute because of all the pain that they were running through their system, when they share how just a few months later, even though they've tried all of these different things like traditional therapy and changing their diet and all these other things, pharmaceuticals, nothing worked. And especially such a short amount of time where they're able to heal from these things, that just opens up the possibilities for a newbie coming in to say, wow, if she did that, if she healed her addiction to alcohol like I did, if I healed my unconscious relationships because I healed myself, if she can do it, I can do it too. Especially because it's in the women and in our community, if you think about women of color, there are very few good examples. I can't even think of any, to be honest with you. Maybe a couple of good examples of women that are leading the way as it relates to holistic healing when it comes to meditation and yoga. We don't have a lot of examples of that. When you bring in a woman to our community who's never practiced this, who then starts to practice this work and heals herself, that just gives permission for all the other women who perhaps were not giving themselves permission because they felt like they were basically, I'm thinking of that word that it's not self-sabotaging, but it's a word that basically makes us feel imposters. That's the word. It makes us feel like imposters. Because ultimately, that's one of the things that I feel I carry as a great ancestral karmic or a great ancestral trait is that I really just listen to my soul and I don't care what people think of me. And I especially am a very much of an early adapter. Like the practices that I'm talking to you about today, like Kundalini yoga, I know I'm a pioneer for this, but this is a practice that's going to be very normal and common in the next 10 years. It's going to be known as preventive medicine. In fact, in places like Australia already, or in places like, especially Spain, they're very far advanced. They're already integrating things that we haven't even caught up with. And I know this to be true also because going to Kundalini Yoga therapist certification through my training, my colleagues, the students that I learn with, they're doctors, Western traditional doctors, Western psychotherapists who are now taking the Kundalini Yoga therapist certification to truly understand somatic healing, which is the emotions, which is healing at the level of the DNA. Because when you go to a doctor, they don't ask you what happened to you in your childhood or what happened to you in your lineage, which is the root cause of why you're sick, why you have the cancer, why you have the diabetes, why you have the kidney failure. It has everything to do with your emotions and your environment, what you grew up in, all of that. Like it's a known fact that children who suffer from asthma, they live in a very high stressful living environment. They can trace it back, asthma, the inability to breathe, to the stress levels of the parents. And not just as they're growing up, but the stress level of the mom when she was pregnant. Because remember, that's when your patterns are actually wired into the nervous system and into the brain. So it's super important for us to have the right support system, whether that is a community, because they're going to show you the possibilities of what is possible for you, but also because being part of a conscious community, it is proven also by science that the frontal cortex part of your brain actually starts to turn on. And when we have the frontal cortex part of the brain turning on, we have communication between the glands that then secrete. This is how you open up the medicine cabinet from within. You don't need medicine from outside of you. It's all in here. It's been secreting nasty chemicals in your body, your brain, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the pineal. When you've been through emotional trauma and you haven't dealt with it at the level of the DNA, it secretes nasty chemicals into your body that are making you sick. Well, when you're part of a conscious community, you have the support system of someone, guess what? The frontal cortex starts to work again, and it starts to activate the other glands, which then start to create a cocktail of really good chemicals for your body, for your mind and spirit, so that you could heal. So scientifically, your brain is getting a great exercise through being part of conscious community, having a support system, right? Spiritually, you can see the possibilities of what's possible for you, right? Mentally, you can really learn to have compassion for yourself and for others. And having a great support system, again, seeking help from someone who's already done what you want to do actually allows you to collapse time, so that you don't feel lost, and so that you're not trying out methods that actually don't work or that are not going to give you the lasting results. So finding like-minded individuals, especially what is known as like your tribe right now, is absolutely imperative as it relates to the healing journey. We don't get sick alone, and we cannot heal alone either. In fact, what we're seeing right now, this epidemic that they're talking about, loneliness, that the Surgeon General recently talked about, is a reaction. It's a effect of all of this post-pandemic situation where many people were alone for such a long time, not engaging with other human beings. You see, engagement and community is just as important as you eating and drinking water. That's what science says. So when we don't have a good support system in our healing journey, we give up, we can't stay committed, we feel like we're never going to get to the light, and we give up ultimately on the journey, which ultimately puts us back into these patterns of toxicity. So like I mentioned, these are very important, essential elements that we need in order to truly disrupt these ancestral karmic patterns. You need commitment, you need a solid plan that actually works, and you need the right support system. And this is where Kundalini Yoga meditation and A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy becomes the tool, the avenue to actually get you to do that, to not only get you the results in a quantum speed, because it's not years and years of therapy. None of my clients have been with me years and years of therapy. It's very fast and very efficient based on the level of commitment you have to the work. And if you follow the work exactly as it's given to you, then the results are inevitable. And I've never not seen someone not get the results when they're following the program exactly to a T. So as we come to the end of this very transformative journey, speaking about these three key elements, remember that healing our nervous system and rewiring our brain from these ancestral patterns of emotional pain is within your reach. It's between all of our reaches. By embracing these three really powerful keys we've explored today, you have the ability to break free from these chains of the past and to create a future filled with joy, with love, with fulfillment. You have to commit to your healing journey, right? You have to implement a solid plan of Kundalini Yoga meditation, specific meditations, and of course, the spiritual psychotherapy work to be able to learn to go beyond forgiveness to acceptance. And you have to surround yourself with a supportive community, a mentor, right? That allows the power of these tools to guide you towards a life of true transformation and of healing. You're not alone on this path. Remind yourself of that a lot. The universe is cheering you on. Your ancestors are cheering you on. And we're here to support you every day of the way, of course, in our community. So you just have to take that first step towards healing your nervous system, towards rewiring your brain, and towards living a life where you have reclaimed your sovereignty, you're living in abundance, and you're finding it easier and easier to integrate inner peace. It's not impossible for us. It's possible for all of us if we commit to these three key elements. I just want to thank you all so much for joining us on this incredible journey. Thank you for being part of our community. Don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to this channel, of course, where I'll be providing even more empowering content as it relates to disrupting these ancestral karmic patterns. Together, let's disrupt these cycles and let's create a future filled with healing and infinite possibilities for ourselves. Until next time, may your journey be filled with love, with light, and with profound transformation. Sat Nam, beautiful sovereign woman, and I will see you soon.